Namaste. I'm going to speak about three friends of mine. One of them has been in corporate life for quite a while, and he enjoyed being on living on his own initially. And now he feels he's a little stuck because he's not old, but he wishes that he had a family and that he had married earlier. He had someone to go back to every evening. That's one. I have another friend who feels that she has not moved fast enough in her career. She feels that it's probably because of what we call as a top heavy organization. There are many more people who fill up the hierarchy, and that has, in a way, stifled her quick progress up the so called corporate ladder. And then I have another friend who, for many years, he has been in organizations in many different roles, and several of them in senior roles. But corporate life does not give him joy anymore. In fact, he says that I'm just, feeling stuck over here. I would love to leave leave corporate life in general, in fact, and start maybe an educational institute of my own or work in a business school, something to do with education. What I have just described is a very common phenomenon. In fact, as I was narrating this to you, it's possible that you could relate to other friends like this, which you have, who feel in some way stuck in a particular place in life or in a particular position in an organization or in a particular phase of life from where there isn't enough significance coming in from that particular role. And hence, our rishis, our ancestors recognized these very early, and they created a mechanism in society for movement, for growth, for evolution, for individuals, for groups, and for mankind at large. Imagine a structure, imagine an organizational mechanism, imagine something that enables every individual to grow, every individual to move ahead, every individual to evolve. Not only that, while they are in this journey of growth, they would also be able to contribute meaningfully, add value, learn in the process, recognize their own strengths, get appreciation from others, get support from others, and the rest of society would also be of support to you. All this came together in what I refer to as groups of four. And there are three groups of four which were created for an orderly society in days of yore. And in fact, it's an eternal principle, but it has been much abused, rather misused, because of ignorance, because of lack of understanding the principles that lie at the foundation of all of this. What am I speaking about? I'm speaking about three concepts. The first one is called Aashramvyavastha. The second one is called Varnavyavastha. The third one is called Purushaarth. Now, these are all ways of tapping the strengths, the abilities, the talents, and the present circumstances by way of various factors for every individual in society. For example, the entire idea of the Aashramvyavastha is about a chronological movement for individuals in society. Which means, even if we look at society today, typically an individual would pass through these three phases and then finally into the last phase of life. What are the three phases? The first phase would be one of being a student. So from the time the person is born and then grows into an age where he or she can attend school, whether formally or homeschool, doesn't matter. There is a student stage where there is a learning stage, and there the individual gets a what I will refer to as a formal education. And then comes the time for the application of this education, the application of the skills, where an individual finds a form of employment, a form of livelihood, whether in an organization or a self-created one. And then comes a stage where the person needs to hand over some of these activities to younger, more deserving people, more active people, and then the individual plays the role of mentoring them and making sure that the organization or the institution continues, isn't it? And finally, there'll come a stage where everything needs to be handed over and merely what I would refer to as the sunset of life. Now, this seems extremely natural. But when this is translated into a mechanism, a social order, it is referred to as the Aashramvyavastha. So what is the Aashramvyavastha? Let's understand. The first stage over there is referred to as Brahmacharya. Now, Charya refers to moving on the path of. And Brahma, while it is a much deeper concept, you could take it as the understanding of the absolute, understanding of the ultimate, understanding of who I am and what is my role in this world. All of this falls under the earlier stated category of studenthood. So Brahmacharya is that phase of studenthood where I am focusing merely on my actual education without being distracted by anything else. And during that period, society supported you. Society made sure that you were enabled to do that in the best possible way. This is Brahmacharya. After Brahmacharya comes the next stage where we are making use of that education that I got and formalizing it perhaps by way of, one is personally, so I could be becoming a householder, and second is by way of getting a job. And the two come together where I run a home. This stage could be called as that of a gruhastha. And together combined with ashram, it's gruhasthashram. Now what is gruhastha? Gruha refers to a house, a home. Stha is being in that, which means it is a stage where I am a householder, where I am taking responsibility for a home, for a family, and making sure of their welfare, their benefit. I am obviously a beneficiary of the same. That's the second stage. Now what comes after that? As referred to earlier, there comes a time in life where we say, all right, I've been a student, I've enjoyed, my personal and professional pursuits, but now I have to make sure that others can do the same. Now, when this was structured in society, this was referred to as the Vanaprasthashram. Vana over here refers to Vana, literally meaning forest. Prastha referring to prasthan, matlab वन की तरफ प्रस्थान करना. Now this is a metaphor. In those days, people actually moved into a mode of semi-retirement where people moved from the comforts of a home to there where you can have a natural living in the woods, right? Some part of the woods. And you would still be sustained by both the woods and your contact with family. In modern times, this has got great implications. And the implication is that Do you remain where you are active in doing everything? But mind you, alongside, you are also blocking the ways of other suitable people for your role, for your positions, even for consumption of resources. So, as a Vanaprastha comes the stage where I am making way for others to take hold, to take charge of the same responsibilities which I once held. But I play an important role of a mentor alongside. I play the role of one who handholds and makes this possible. So I am in a way making my own dependence and I would say even significance lesser and lesser in that institution. This is Vanaprastha. Now, having done all of this, well, everything has been accomplished in life to a certain level, and now comes the time that I move into a period of silence, a period of non attachment, a phase of where I am preparing mentally that this is a time when I will finally move out of the world. Right now, this is a natural occurrence. There is nobody who doesn't have an end to one's life. But imagine being able to mentally prepare for that as a time where I actually wind down from all my active occupations in life. I disengage, I detach, so that that period enables me and my world also to prepare and mentally adjust to my not being present. Now, this stage is referred to as sannyas, and sannyas literally means total purification. Your initial purification or your initial stage of purity was when you came into the world. And total purification means that you get back to the same because you came into your world with nothing. And now you can exit the world without any attachments. What a beautiful way the entire ashram system was structured. Now, this is as far as chronological evolution was designed. Now, let's come to the second group of four. Now, I refer back to my friend, and she was feeling stuck in her position in the hierarchy because there is no further movement, because the person above her has been there for years and has no plans of moving out. Now, just let's look at what happens in an organization. Now, what happens in an organization typically is there are layers, right? And if you just put them into some standardized way, it would be that there are people who come as freshers into the organization, then they become what I would refer to as first time managers, then they become senior managers, and finally in the position of leadership. This is if you were in an organization for a particular period of time. Now, of course, these things move much faster. But the same thing has to apply in a structured and regulated format. And when this is done in a meaningful manner, it is called as a Varnavyavastha. Let me explain. Now, what happens is at different stages in our career, as we are growing intellectually, that means our skills are growing, what we can contribute to the organization changes. Let's look at it. When I just start in an organization, I am able to contribute by way of only helping others. That means others are managing certain roles and I am of help to them. Hence, we have something called as a management trainee. That means it is still in progress. So, my contribution at that point in time is merely by way of service. When this corresponds to the Varnavyavastha, this is referred to as the Shudra. Now, the Shudra over here does not mean in any way inferior. It means lower in the hierarchy. So, that Shudra. As that management trainee or the graduate trainee or a trainee in general begins to gain maturity by way of experience, by way of mindset, by way of skills as well, then the individual becomes ready to contribute little bit more. and probably handling a role where one can see the contribution overall to the larger scheme of things in the business. For instance, a management trainee in sales could move into a role where the individual himself or herself does sales. Even if the person is not in sales, the person is in a situation, a place of responsibility where some connect can be seen. This is where the individual begins to contribute economic value. And the corresponding stage in our Indian Shastra, in the Varnavyavastha, is called Vaishya. So, Vaishya is that stage where one individual is able to contribute economic value. What happens next? So let's say the same individual who joined as a trainee and is then able to become a contributor in some way economically. What happens thereafter? Typically, that individual will move into a senior management role. And in a senior management role, the individual becomes a team leader responsible not just for the profile, but also responsible for a team, responsible for other people. And therein comes the responsibility to ensure that their careers are also taken care of. This taken care of situation has a parallel in the Varnavyavastha as the Kshatriya. In fact, Kshatriya itself means to protect, to preserve, to take charge. And it is analogous or corresponds directly to the senior manager role or even the HOD role, if you will, where the person is responsible for a team and begins to contribute not just economic value but also by way of general management skills. What happens next? So, a time will come when the individual is expected to rise to a role where he or she can think of the future of the organization. And when we think of the future of the organization, the individual may be capable and mature enough by now to think even for the industry. Isn't it? Therefore, several leaders are there on industry bodies, on industry associations. When they are thinking for the future of the organization, when they are thinking for future of the industry, then the contribution is by way of thought, contribution by way of intellectual capital. This, by the way, corresponds directly to the Varna known as Brahman. Now we have got this all wrong. And we have unfortunately labeled these as the caste system. Well, if in an organization you need hierarchy, a similar kind of order is required in society at large just to ensure that there are certain markers for transition. What do I mean by that? Let's look at the true meaning of Varna. Varna literally refers to color. What color are we looking at? Are we looking at color of the skin? No, we are not looking at the external color. We are not looking at that color which divides people, breaks people. Rather, we are looking at the maturity. Therefore, this color is color of the intellect, color of the mindset, color of the maturity of that individual. As the maturity gets enhanced, so will be the role of the individual. Is that not the reason why we have titles such as blue-collared workers, why we have white-collared workers, and a much lesser used phrase of a supervisor called as a light blue-collared worker? It is exactly the same notion. But you wouldn't make a management trainee the CEO of an organization, right? Why won't you? Because the maturity, experience, and the skill is not sufficient at that point in time. Now, when this is played out in organizations, in fact, this is played out everywhere, including in homes, including in housing societies, including in educational institutions. As the individual gains in skill, gains in maturity, the worth of the individual goes up. So it seems like you could call it an ascension from a lower profile to a higher profile. This, by the way, Vyavastha refers to an organization or a system. Varnavyavastha is therefore the ability for the individual to rise on the basis of his or her intellectual and emotional muscle. This is the second pass. Then comes the story of my third friend, and you may have seen similar. I have met so many people who, after having spent lots of time in organizations at senior levels, including roles of CEOs, they suddenly feel, what am I doing? Is this worth it? What are they looking for? Significance. And when you start looking for significance, when that becomes prominent for you, you could say this is referred to as the spiritual evolution of humans. Because you are no longer satisfied with something that you did just 10 years ago. You want more meaning in your life. This was understood by our rishis centuries back. So they said at different points in life, an individual will seek meaning or get meaning from various things. And this differs and became what is referred to as Purushaarth. In fact, you don't know that Artha itself means meaning. Let's call that meaning as significance. And Purush refers to human. So those pursuits which give significance to human life are called as Purushartha. तो पहला कौन सा पुरुषार्थ है? The first पुरुषार्थ is that of dharma. And it is saying the first thing that provides meaning to individuals is that which helps an individual understand how to lead that life. So dharma over here is referring to those principles, those concepts that enrich that individual to understand what is the user manual for this equipment. So that user manual and following those principles is what is called as dharma. So that's the first stage in the spiritual evolution. The second one becomes, oh, I have understood that. Now how do I use it? I can develop a way to use it by way of creation of livelihood for myself as also for others. So now my hunger moves from only the learning of it, the knowing of it, to the doing of it. The doing of it is called Artha. So Artha over here, the second pursuit, the second Purushartha, refers to being able to generate wealth for self and others. That extension of that wealth can be called as prosperity, which is not limited to financial resources alone. What happens thereafter? Having created prosperity, now there is a need and there is an urge to be able to partake of it. After all, what use is it to be able to earn money, respect, etc. if I'm not able to enjoy it? So the third pursuit is called Kama. Kama is being able to enjoy that which I have done so far without enjoying it in such a way that I actually sink into it and I get consumed by it. So Kama over here refers to being able to enjoy all that I have done, the Artha that I have created, the position that has come to me, the world and the family that is around me. I am completely entitled to enjoy that, and that is referred to as Kama. Now I have done Dharma, I have had Artha, I have enjoyed Kama. Now there comes a stage, my dear friends, as we mentioned earlier, where the individual no longer enjoys this because he or she has had enough of it, and one begins to cloy of this. And that's the time that one begins to think of, what is it that really I am here for? What is it that I finally want to do? How should I merge with that thing which is called the divine? The meanings of it may change for different individuals, but fact is that that is the only absolute truth of this world. And when I start contemplating this, the paths to it become clear. It may be by way of, educating others. It might be way of social service, it may be a way of different things. This finally leads to the ultimate unity of man with the divine, which is called as moksha. And moksha is something that will happen to all individuals. But how do I proactively move in that direction? That too has been provided by our rishis. And one of the ways to do it, I think the whole world knows, is yoga. But unfortunately, again, yoga is thought of as exercise rather than anything else. Yoga is a systematic way of moving towards my unity with the divine. In fact, yoga comes from the root yujja. Yujja is about unity. Unity with what? Unity of matter and energy. Matter is only energy vibrating at a high frequency. Matter has to finally dissolve into energy. Can I actually move to it at will? That would be moksha. Let's close with an example. Let's look at the life of Samrat Chandragupt Maurya. Now, Chandragupt Maurya was a tribal chief's son. Alright? And as a tribal chief's son, one can say, therefore, he was not one of royal blood. But not being of royal blood did not stop him from moving up the ranks, I would say, fairly easily. So as Acharya Chanakya groomed him from a student, he would have moved to becoming a soldier. First as an individual contributor, then he would have become responsible for a team, then he would have become a commander, and then finally, having been tested on many missions and having been tested administratively, he was given the position of a Samrat. And being a Samrat was not a gaddi, my dear friend. It was not just a seat. It was a very powerful responsibility because you were responsible for the prosperity of the nation. Now, this is as far as the Varnavyavastha is considered. Now, let's look at his ashrams. He was initially a student when he was first identified as a potential for that role that would possibly come to him at the end of it. Even the child did not know. So what was he in the role of? He was in brahmacharya and he would have got the finest education from his acharya. You could say it was among the first examples of homeschooling, because naturally if he had moved to only the university education, things wouldn't have moved so fast. After that, he was given the role of a commander, etc., as I mentioned. But you could also see that when he finally became a Samrat, or you could say the role of a king, moving on to becoming an emperor, much more conquest and all of that, he also became a married person. And in those days, because of having multiple allies, the chances of you being married to not just one, but multiple partners was quite high. That means you, in a way, handle multiple households. So what was this role? This was of Grihastha Ashram. Then what did Chandragupt do? History tells us that he was in the role of a Samrat for close to 35 years. But one can visualize in the last 4 to 5 years, he would have groomed his son Bindusar. We know that Bindusar became a king, and Bindusar was able to maintain, at least preserve the kingdom in the way it should have been. Not too much is spoken about him as a conqueror, but that's okay. To be able to create the next Samrat for Bharat would have taken some doing. That would have been his Vanaprastha ashram, because mentally he is already preparing to move out of that role. And in that time, he would have transferred all the knowledge, experience, skills, everything that's possible to Bindusar. What does he do next? Please don't forget that this child was initially just the son of a tribal chief. To become the Samrat of Bharat would have been such a big thing for him. It could have been a lifetime attachment, and he could have stayed in that role till death. But he didn't do that. The moment he knew that Bindusar was ready, he planned to formally move into the sannyas ashram. And that he did. So if you see in the south of Bharat, around Mysore, there is a place called Shravanbegola. And Shravanbegola still holds a monument which is dedicated to Chandragupt Maurya. It is said that is the place where finally his death came. He had moved himself into the role of sannyas. He left his kingdom, left everything behind, left his family behind. And he lived as a hermit in his last days, my dear friends. This is Sannyas Ashram. The ability to take the teachings of Acharya Chanakya from knowledge to the practice of it through all the ashrams. What an amazing life it was. Finally, let's go to Purushaarth. So first, he would have learnt the concepts of dharma in its entirety again during his education. So dharma hua. Then as the role of a king, he created artha, he created prosperity for the whole nation. Much of what Bharat is today rests on that foundation that was created in 300 BC. We may or may not realize it. That artha happened because of Chandragupt Maurya. After that, as Chanakya has told him, please don't think that you have to deprive yourself of pleasures. So in his role, automatically he had a palace, he had wives, he had children, he would have had a lot of luxuries. He did not deprive himself of that, but there is no episode that tells us any time there were any excesses, which means that he lived the role of Kama perfectly. And as we just saw, when he moved into his role of living like a hermit, there's no doubt in the world that he would have got his due place in what we call as Svarga, the integration with divinity. This, my dear friends, is the moksha. So even if you take just one example of Chandragupt Maurya, you can see that through his life, he has lived the groups of 4 in the perfect order. One who is able to do this as per the prescribed norms is said to have followed his or her Swadharma. Swadharma is to say that whatever my dharma, at different chronologies in my life, at different stages in my life, and as per my different pursuits of life as it should be, then I have followed my dharma. Hope this is helpful. In your life too, you can start by considering and contemplating what stage am I at? What role am I in? What is my pursuit at this point in time? You know the sequence now. Apply this to yourself. Do a little bit of swadhyay, self-reflection, and you will know what is to be done next. If you need more help, you can refer to our Shastra. Namaste and Dhanyavad.